right, joining us right now is Ravens beat reporter for The Athletic, Jeff Zrebiec. Jeff, thanks for taking some time here. Obviously, a huge night ahead of us, the first round of the NFL draft. In your opinion, what do you think the Ravens do tonight? We know that they have traded up, they've traded down, they've traded back into the first round in recent years, and we know that DaCosta has talked about trading, but right now they have the 28th overall pick. What do you think they do?
You know, I can't remember, and I probably say this every year, but this year I think it's especially true given the climate and the fact that there's been so little information out there about, who's interested in who, just because there's been no pre-draft meetings and there's no pro days. So I think it's as hard to project as it's been in a while. You never know how the Ravens have their board, what they're thinking. But I have a hard time believing when you look at their roster and you look at two specific players out there, if one of the inside linebackers falls to them, LSU's Patrick Queen, Oklahoma's Kenneth Murray, two guys who, had really good final seasons in college, project to be day one starters. They have a lot of intangibles. Kenneth Murray's intangibles are off the charts. And they would be plug-and-play players immediately for the Ravens. And the question is, are they there at that spot at 28? And if it looks like they're going off the board or one of them goes, will the Ravens make a move to go forward? So we'll have to see. I think one of those picks would be a no-brainer if they're there. I think other guys, LSU's receiver, Justin Jefferson, is a guy that they like and a lot of other teams like. And then, if there's a bunch of guys that are gone that they have high on their board, a center like Michigan Cesar Ruiz could be the pick, not the sexiest of picks, but a day one starter when you lose Yonda, when there's questions about Scora's knee injury, you can't really beat a day one starter there. That'll probably be your starter there for 4 consecutive years, no questions asked. So they'll have plenty of options. But right now I almost feel more comfortable in predicting they'll trade out of that spot than I do in giving you the name of a player who they'll take, to be honest.
Right, and you mentioned Justin Jefferson and the receivers this year. Eric DaCosta has made no bones about it, no secret. He thinks this draft is deep, and specifically at the receiver position, saying he thinks this year you could get a starter as late as the 5th round. It's pretty safe to say by the end of Saturday and the end of round 7, the Ravens have a receiver, don't you think?
Yeah, I think the question is not if, it's how many and when they turn in that card for a receiver. If you look at it, really only Marquise Brown, Miles Boykin, and Willie Snead are locks for the roster. Now, I didn't name Chris Moore, but if he makes it, he's going to make it on the strength of his special teams, not at wide receiver. So you can consider him if you want. But the reality is they have at least 2 open spots on this roster once the regular season starts for receivers. And it would kind of be a missed opportunity if you're talking about, this is the best receiver draft in years. I think I read somewhere ESPN's Mel Kiper has 30 receivers with top 4th round grades, and that's incredible. That's basically 8 receivers around if you can. Now, it's not going to play out like that. There'll be some push, but the Ravens will draft a receiver. I'd be honestly almost surprised if they don't draft one by day 2, at least one by day 2. We'll see when the run on receivers goes, but there's going to be receivers every time they're on the clock that they could take, and that would probably help them. And I'm talking in the first, 3-4 rounds. I think there's scenarios where they could take a receiver in the first. I think there definitely will be scenarios in that 2nd, 3rd round where they're going to have their choice of a bunch of receivers that a lot of teams like, and they're going to have to make the decision what's the best fit for them. But, I know that's what fans are most excited about, and I think at some point pretty early in the draft we'll see them take a receiver.
You think about the process of this last month and leading up to the draft, so many schools no pro days, right?
Mhm.
No draft visits, going these prospects going to facilities, meeting the team, interviewing at the facilities. The Ravens haven't had a chance or an opportunity to do that. So, I mean, I think maybe not only the Ravens, but a lot of teams around the league go maybe the safer route this year specifically because in a normal circumstance, you're getting these guys that you want to find a little bit more about. You're getting them into your facility. You get to pick their brain, meet them, work them out. They can't do that this year. What do you think? You think around the league we see GMs and scouts rely more on the tape than ever before?
Yeah, I agree with you, Shawn. And I think, first of all, safe pick isn't necessarily the wrong pick. And then you look at two factors. Who does all these cancellations hurt? It hurts guys with injury questions, and it hurts guys with character red flags, guys that you want to bring in your building and see how they react to questions and see what kind of vibe they give off and just see how they act. And, there's a lot of guys out there with character red flags that may have done something when they were younger, but, they've grown from it. But there's going to be guys that are off teams' boards because teams really haven't gotten enough of an opportunity to do due diligence on some of the background stuff and talk to this kid and get to know him. I mean, Jimmy Smith is an example of that. Ravens did so much homework on Jimmy Smith. He had all these character flags coming out, and the Ravens got to know him very early in the process and were comfortable with him. And in talking to Jimmy Smith at one point, he said he felt like the Ravens were the only team that did that. So I think, you can get a feel for a kid in a FaceTime or a Zoom interview, which is what they've been doing. But you don't get as good of a vibe than when you bring him in the building and see how he's carrying himself and see how he reacts to questions. And you kind of bring him into your environment. And along with that, I also think, team doctors are not allowed to look at these kids when they come in for physicals. They haven't had those. So, do you take a chance on an injury guy, a guy who's had a lot of injuries early when you don't truly know yet? You haven't had it, your doctor hasn't looked at him. I would have to think it's going to have to be a special player to have that overridden. And, you look at it like an Alabama linebacker, Terrell Lewis, who has not played much in college because of injuries. Now, the Ravens have good relationships with Alabama, so they should know. But I would have thought he could be a late first round, early second pick. There's talk he may fall just because teams may not be comfortable and may not know enough about the injuries to pick him early.
Recently, you published an article where you met up with the two Maryland Terrapins running backs in this year's draft, Javon Leake and Anthony McFarland. What'd you find out?
Just good kids. And, you always wonder, it's so competitive in college. And these guys both wanted to be the guy at Maryland. They came there. One was a, 3-star recruit. The other was a 4-star recruit. And they came there, competing, and they knew each one of them wanted the ball in their hands. And yet they became best friends. And that's pretty refreshing. Javon Leake was the kind of guy that took a back seat for a couple years. And, ironically, and Javon Leake wasn't happy it came this way, he got his big chance this year because Anthony McFarland was injured much of the year. So that kind of opened the door for him. But it's just kind of a cool story how you have these two kids who kind of came into Maryland together, dealt with all the tumultuous days they've had on that campus and all the losing. And, these guys each had 3 different coaches. So they've been through a lot at Maryland, and now they decide it's time to go out to the NFL. And look, they're kind of in the same boat. McFarland may be picked a little earlier than Javon Leake. I mean, people seem to think McFarland is in that 4th, 5th round range when Javon Leake's more 6th, 7th. But you never know who teams like. Javon Leake is a heck of a return man. I can think of at least one team here locally that could use a really good return man. So it'll be good. They can't watch the draft together, which is a shame, just given the relationship and the current climate. But I think, I'm guessing one of their first texts they're going to get will be from the other guy congratulating them when their name does get called.
He is Jeff Zrebiec of the Athletic Ravens beat reporter. Jeff, thanks for taking the time, man. Stay safe. Stay well.
You too, Shawn. Thanks for having me.
You got it.